G'day there, Andrew Jobling, the accidental author. I hope you are having a wonderful day, as am I, and time for our monthly video cast. As always, my hope and desire is to have a guest with me each month to help inspire you to continue on to write your book, get it published, get it out there and make a difference. And I'm really excited and honoured to have a very, very special guest with me this month, Mr. Andy Zagami. And Andy has written a book, you might say that, called Unbreakable. And I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I am going to say the title of his book is Unbreakable, and that's because this is a man who is unbreakable, and he's got a pretty unique, amazing, and incredibly inspiring story. So, Andy, welcome.
Thank you very much. That was quite the introduction.
I've built it up, mate, haven't I? Now you've got to really sort of come through with the goods. Anyway, mate, thank you for joining me. I think the best place to start is if the people watching this, and as you know, people watching this are in the process of writing books and becoming authors, and a lot of them are wanting to write about their journey to help and inspire other people. But so I think, let's, as a first step, tell us a little bit about your journey to this point and some of the challenges you've had to overcome, and what has now led you to writing a book called Unbreakable.
Right. So, long story short, because we don't have don't want to spoil the whole book, but I guess throughout my whole life, there's been a whole bunch of health challenges. When I was born, I had a brain hemorrhage, so I was having brain surgery when I was 7 days old. Fractured my spine when I was a teenager. Had glandular fever, that's a tiny thing, whatever. Cancer a few times in my early 20s. So yeah, ended up having that 3 times, had a whole bunch of stuff chopped out of me. And in and amongst all the cancer, they ended up finding that I had tuberculosis as well.
Wow, as if cancer wasn't enough.
No, yeah, and just some totally random disease that they didn't think existed in Australia anymore. Sure, just throw that in there for a bit of fun. So, it's been an interesting 30-odd years on this planet, and I'd like to think I've learned a thing or two from all these challenges. And I guess, so along the way, after my first diagnosis with cancer, I met a bunch of people who were really interested to hear my story. So I was up on a few different stages, kind of just sharing my story and everything that I'd been through and what I'd learnt till that point. Mind you, I was, 23, 24 at the time, so still pretty young and not really knowing a whole lot. But yeah, they were all really inspired by what I was saying, and somebody just randomly came up to me one day and said, "You need to turn this into a book." It was as simple as that. I had never considered it. I was definitely not your typical great English student at school. I wasn't a writer. The thought of writing a 1,000-word essay back in school was, daunting enough, let alone a 55,000 word book. So yeah, that was all it was. It was just that one thing. You should turn this into a book. Rest is history.
And do you know what? Often that's the way it happens. And I know, mate, you and I are very similar because we've got quite a similar background. And I know for myself, writing a book was not something I'd ever thought about doing. I thought I was good enough to do the same. Exactly. It was not.
Yeah.
So it just shows you don't need skill and talent. What you need is a message and a desire to get that message out to the world. And what I love about what you're doing now, Andy, is you're now taking what you've learned in that process to obviously survive tuberculosis, cancer 3 times, everything else that's happened to you, and you're now using all that information and what you've done to be a healthy, happy, successful human being, and now you're sharing other people. I know you have a personal training business.
Yeah, so I've been a personal trainer for a bit over 12 years now, and that all started literally 2 months before I got diagnosed. So, good timing. Turn 21, open a business, get cancer, whatever seems to be.
Well, do you know what, mate? It's probably, and you look back, and I know we said before we started recording that you're sort of the emotional charges. It's not as emotional for you to talk about it anymore because you've spoken about it so much. So hence why, you're coming across as with a bit of, a bit lighthearted, with a bit of sense of humour, which is a good way to look at it. but you know, what you've learned and the things you've gone through have equipped you to be a way better personal trainer. And because it's not just about obviously getting someone fit, it's about helping them create long-term well-being for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things that I got out of my treatment was that I needed to start looking into nutrition and the proper foods that I was eating, because growing up I was a gymnast and I just ate whatever I wanted and I was fine, and you know, never had, well, at least I thought I never had any issues. But once I really started getting into it and looking at it, I was like, okay, there are certain foods here that I know I need to be eating a lot more of, some that are potentially linked to cancer or, you know, whatever. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but you know, so I was just like, okay, let's stick with these ones, avoid those ones. I'm going to feel better. I'm going to be more energized. I know my insides are going to be healthier for it. So let's go that way. And everything that I learned through that has translated through to my clients as well. And that's made such a massive impact on my business, because it used to just be about training. I'm like, oh yeah, here's a meal plan. You just follow that. And I didn't really do much more than that. So yeah, it's totally shifted.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so let's talk about the book, mate, because yeah, as you said, it was a random idea that was planted in your head by someone. So tell us about how you went about writing the book. How I mean, I guess some of the challenges you probably overcame in writing the book as well, and what sort of benefits have come to you as a result of writing the book.
I guess it's interesting that I said that it was a random idea. I mean, it was, but then in saying that beforehand, it's really interesting when you're getting interviewed, you pick up little things. No matter how many times I get asked these questions, this has never occurred to me. So it's good. It's great. I was writing things down during my treatment with no idea of where it was going to go or what it was doing before I got told that it should be turned into a book. So my idea with my treatment was to basically get it all out of my head. I needed to clear my head, and I thought, you know, I can go talk to a psychologist, which I was doing a little bit of, but then I just felt like I needed my own personal diary. So, you know, over the course of a couple of years of bits and pieces of treatments, I just had scattered thoughts over pages, and it was crazy. And I never knew what it was going to turn into. It was words on a page, nothing else. There was no structure, nothing. And then I met this lady who offered to mentor me to put the book together. So she had her structure and all the rest, and, you know, here's your template and follow this and flesh it out, and that's how it's going to make sense. And I remember the first time I looked at the template and I'm like, wow, that is so simple. Why didn't this, you know, how's this only just come to me now? But once we had worked out that template, it made it much easier to then get all these random thoughts that I'd done a while ago and, you know, squish them all in together. Yeah. And it was a very therapeutic process for me. That was the biggest thing I got out of writing it. You know, it was for helping other people, of course, but for me, it was probably the most healing thing that I could have done for myself. Okay.
So I want to come back to that point, because that's the theme, obviously, of what we're talking about today. Apart from, obviously, that healing process, what's the book done? I mean, how's it enhanced, you know, what you now do day to day?
It's given me a lot of credibility. You know, when especially in my industry as a personal trainer, you know, every man and his dog is a personal trainer. You know, everyone's got a personal trainer on their phone these days. So it's kind of like, how are we all so different? And realistically, the only thing that makes us different is our unique stories. So when I come to a new client and say, I've written a book, here's a copy, that instantly opens them up and goes, oh, wow, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. You know, he's not just some kid who's done a course in 2 weeks at the gym. And, you know, so that in itself has, it's helped bring a lot more trust into my business.
Yep.
And as a result, made it a bigger business.
Yep.
So, you know, that's been amazing. And then on top of that, just, you know, the speaking events that I've been invited to purely because I'm an author, nothing to do with anything else, you know, so that never would have happened if I wasn't an author. And through all of those, you know, apart from the fact that I've sold almost a couple of thousand books, you know, the hundreds and hundreds, well, thousands really, of people that I've met and who have said, thank you for sharing your story. That the most empowering thing ever. I mean, you would know as well, it's so humbling to hear somebody say, thank you for sharing your message. Or somebody who's come up to me who's already read the book and said that they've read it and they've changed their life and they feel better or whatever it is. That I love that. That's the purpose of the book.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm so glad. Thank you for sharing all that, because again, when you're in the midst of writing the book, and for a lot of people watching this, they're in that process of writing or trying to get it published, and it's a bit of a battle for some people. To know that on the other side of the battle, when you've got your book, it's going to give you credibility, it's going to open up doors, it's going to enhance your business, it's going to make a difference in the lives of people, it's going to create opportunities, it's going to do all these wonderful, wonderful things. So I mean, thank you. You've just given a lot of people a lot of hope. So wonderful. Now,
good.
The main purpose of why I really wanted to talk to you, Anne, is because obviously, I mean, you're pretty, at the moment, you've got it together, and emotionally you've sort of, come to terms with what you've had to overcome. But I can imagine while you were, or before you started writing, and times in your life, you must have felt pretty devastated. You must have felt pretty hopeless. You must have, felt, very vulnerable emotionally and physically. So tell us a little bit about how writing the book started to become that healing process for you.
Yeah, so I guess during all my treatment, emotions were all over the place, up and down, and there was definitely a prolonged period, let's call it, where I was pretty closed off, wasn't really communicating with anybody. But what I found was that writing everything down was just helping me process what was happening. So I didn't feel comfortable talking to anybody. I didn't want to share my thoughts. But just being able to get it on paper kind of helped me look at it at a different perspective. So that in itself was just, so helpful in the early stages. And then it just kind of spiraled from there, where I would eventually start showing people little bits that I was writing. Like, still wasn't comfortable talking to them, but it's like, okay, well, here's how I've been feeling because I know you're concerned. So, this is me, just bear with me. And I'm doing my best to get out of all this stuff that's going on. And eventually, if I wasn't putting pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, whatever, if I wasn't doing that, I don't think I would be here today.
Wow.
I firmly believe that writing the book saved my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful, mate. And I know there's a lot of people that are going to relate to what you've just said there, because a lot of people probably feeling that way or have felt that way, where, if something doesn't change, then they may not be around. And that, again, that's giving them wonderful hope. And I think with the comment you said about when you write it, you can see a different perspective, and I can relate to that, because when it's written and you're reading it now, it's sort of it's almost like it's not you anymore, but you're reading the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's also, it's like you can get it out of here and here, where it's causing all this turmoil, and just dump it onto your computer, onto your paper, and it's almost like you've got this weight off your shoulders. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And then and I think because of all the emotion has gone into the book, so it's all there in words. And then so I'm the emotionless viewer kind of above going, oh yeah, that happened and everything's okay.
Yeah. And you can, and as you said, if someone wants to know, tell us a bit about yourself, well, you don't have to go into it. You just say, here, read this. You'll get it all. And it can be a way to share your story in a much more raw and vulnerable way, through your book, and a very predictable way as well, because it's, your book's the same every time someone reads it, even though they might get something different out of it each time. But
well, even I've read over it lose count how many times now, but even I read over it again about a month ago, and I got a few different things out of it. It was still a little bit emotional to read certain parts, and I got a few bits and I was like, that's not right. So it doesn't matter how many times you read it, you're always going to find something.
Well, it's good that you're actually getting something out of your own book. You're learning stuff.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good idea. Why don't I do that? Oh, I did do that. I'll do it again.
I honestly feel like I don't know how this is going to sound, but I don't feel like I'm the same person who wrote the book. I read some of it and I think, how did I come up with that? It's quite amusing sometimes, but I know I've evolved a lot since then, but I think I've clearly forgotten some of the stuff that I wrote. So it's kind of funny in that sense, but I'm hoping that's a thing.
Go on. Well, now, mate, I'm going to ask you just to give some advice to people that are watching this, that are in the midst of writing their book. And some of them, for them, it is an emotional process. It's an emotional journey because they are, trenching through and digging up a lot of their journey, which is very painful for them to write about, think about. What's some advice you could give them to help get them through to the other side so that they can have the same perspective on it as you have now?
The best thing that I did was just write anything that came into my head. There didn't have to be a structure. There didn't have to be a purpose to it. It was just putting pen to paper, because I just noticed the more I did that, the more things became clear. So even if you write an entire page of stuff today, look at it again in a week and throw it out, doesn't matter. It's helped you along your process to get from A to B. Yeah. So that's the best thing I can say.
Wonderful.
Just write whatever comes into your head.
Brilliant, mate. That's so good. Now, you've got a couple of websites, I know, and the two we'll talk about. Obviously, there are people watching this that will go, well, I want to get my hands on a copy of the book. So, and also I was looking at that website earlier today, and you've got a really cool little video that talks a lot about your journey as well. So what's that website, Andy?
So the website is unbreakablebook.com.
Okay, so that's where people can buy the book. That's where they can sort of find out a bit more about the book and the journey. Now, you also have another website where people can contact you for mentoring, for coaching, for, if they're looking for a speaker for an event that they might have. And what's that website?
So andyzagami.com.au.
Okay, wonderful. So anyone watching this, jump on Andy's website, certainly buy this book, which is incredibly inspiring book. And if you feel like you need help or just have a chat, because if you're writing a book that's, that is emotionally taxing you, and it's dragging you through some of the things that are causing a lot of hurt, and he's a wonderful person to talk to because he can give you some perspective. So, mate, I really appreciate having you with me on
Thanks for inviting me.
Interview, which I know is going to impact lots and lots of lives. And
hope so.
Yeah, good one, mate. It's been great talking.
Great.
And
thank you. Cheers.